The Dating Contract by Miwakarai on Archive of Our Own. Before we begin reading, I would just like to say that there is a slight trigger warning for towards the end of the chapter. Chapter 6. Spiraling Lies. Hey, Plag, what just happened? Adrian asked his Kwame, hoping for reassurance that that was just a dream. You achieved your goal, Adrian. By some miracle, that stupid idea of yours worked, and you managed to make Ladybug jealous enough to admit it. Now you can finally break up with Marionette. Plag came out and took the cheese Adrian was holding up for him. Well, then, why do I feel so weird? Adrian held up his hand to his forehead to check if he had a fever. Maybe I don't want to break up with Marionette. I think maybe I've fallen in, Adrian began. Don't even finish that sentence, Plag cut him off. 1. I hate romantic, and 2. Wasn't one of the rules that you wouldn't fall in love with each other? And 3. Even if you broke that rule, what makes you think that she feels the same way about you? Plag tried to talk some reason into Adrian. I don't want to break up with Marionette. Not yet. He looked up at Plag with tears in his eyes. Okay, stop crying. Look, just don't tell her what happened with Ladybug today. What she doesn't know won't hurt her, right? Plag did his best to console Adrian. Interrupting their moment, Adrian's phone began to ring in his pocket. He pulled out his phone and saw that it was his father. He also saw that he had 64 missed calls from him. Great, he cursed underneath his breath, before clicking the green button to answer. He brought the phone up to his ear and didn't say anything, letting his father go ahead with the lecture. Where are you right now? Do you know how many times I've called? Text your bodyguard the location of where you're at. When you get home, give Natalie your phone and go up to your room. I don't even want to look at you. I'm so disappointed, Adrian. I didn't raise you this way. Adrian felt himself shrinking as his father went on about how awful he was. This day can't get any worse, he muttered to himself, as his father hung up the phone, not giving Adrian a chance to explain himself. Not that he could, anyway. I hate lying to my father, Adrian muttered as he scrolled through his contact list. He texted his bodyguard the name of the street he was on and stepped out of the alleyway to wait. Within minutes, his bodyguard pulled up and the door swung open for Adrian to step inside. Sorry for the trouble I caused, Adrian said as he took the seat in the car and buckled his seat. His bodyguard said nothing but offered him a sympathetic look as he began to drive back towards the mansion. Upon arriving, Adrian walked up the concrete steps with Natalie, waiting at the door. A disappointed look at her face. Somehow, that hurt more than the look at his father's angry face. I'm sorry, Natalie, he muttered as he handed her his phone, head still drooping as she followed him up to his room. I'll bring you your dinner later, she said as she walked him to his room. Don't bother, I'm just gonna go sleep now, he said and kicked off his shoes before throwing himself on his bed. Natalie sighed and closed the door behind her, holding her breath as she stood outside the door to hear Adrian begin to cry. She shook her head at the chef, who began making her way up the stairs with a platter of Adrian's dinner. The chef returned the look of pity and turned around to head back towards the kitchen. Natalie walked towards Gabriel's office, knocking twice before letting herself in. Is he angry? Gabriel smirked at Natalie, hoping to use his son's negative emotions to create a powerful villain. No, sir. He's just sad. Maybe you were too hard on him this time, Natalie began. Do not tell me how to discipline my son. This is for the well-being of both of us. I'm doing this for him, he reminded Natalie. Of course, sir. Natalie bowed her head at him and followed as he made his way to his secret lair. Nuru, dark wings, rise, Gabriel exclaimed, shortly after the trapdoor closed beneath him. Where is this negative emotion, my son? Allow it to consume you. He closed his eyes and pressed 2 fingers on his temple, concentrating hard to feel the negative emotion that was in his home. I don't feel anything. I feel sadness, but it's not strong enough. Are you sure he's upset? Hawkmouth turned to Natalie, who nodded. Yes, sir. I left him crying in his room. He must have escaped again. Oh, he's really gonna get it this time, that little... Hawkmouth stormed back onto the pedestal that would bring him back to his office. Dark wings, fall. he yelled as he dismissed Nuru and stomped out of his office, up the stairs towards Adrian's room with Natalie following closely behind. Adrian! He pushed the door open and scanned the room. Empty. Adrian? He looked over at the open window and shouted again. Behind him, Natalie and his bodyguard cowered in fear. I'm right here. What? Gabriel turned around to see Adrian coming out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist. I thought you escaped again. The window was wide open. Gabriel found himself stuttering. Give me a break, will you? I can't even take a shower now. Adrian yelled back at him. Yes, get angry at me. Shout at me, Gabriel thought and continued to try to push Adrian past his limit. You know, I'm just so worried about you. I don't know where you think this rebel act is going to get you, but I can assure you that if you keep this up, you can say goodbye to school again. He spoke calmly, knowing it would make his son angrier to be the only one showing emotion. Father, please. What have I ever done to you? Why do you hate me? Adrian yelled back, feeling tears begin to burn at the corner of his eyes. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. He pleaded with himself. Hate you? Adrian, no. Gabriel held out his hand and placed it on Adrian's shoulder. I'm just looking out for you. The world is a dangerous place, Adrian. And I'm doing this for you. For us. You've been so difficult to deal with ever since your mother. Gabriel tried to convince him without spilling out too much detail of how he was planning to achieve his goal. Say it. Ever since my mother died. You always avoid the topic because you say it upsets you. But don't you think it upsets me too? Do you think you're the only one who misses her? Adrian yelled back. He hated the way his voice cracked, and he hated the way his bodyguard and Natalie listened to him from the doorway. Enough, Adrian! Do not speak ill of your mother, Gabriel shouted back. He could almost feel the anger rising inside of Adrian's heart. Just another push. She and I have worked so hard to give you the life you deserve, and this is how you repay that? By sneaking out to do who knows what? I can't seem to grasp why you'd risk disappointing me to spend time with your useless classmates. Stop it! Stop it! Adrian cried back. He lifted his head up from the ground, and he had been staring at the whole time, and leaned his neck back to look in his father's eyes. His chest tightened, hoping to see his father just as upset as he was. The only emotion on his father's face was a small smirk. Do you enjoy seeing me like this, father? Adrian begged for an answer. Think of how disappointed your mother would be if she was here right now. Gabriel delivered the final blow with his piercing words. It should have been me that died, Adrian yelled, his eyes getting wide as he heard what he had just said. In one quick movement, Gabriel's eyes filled with rage, the smirk disappearing from his face. He brought his hand up high over his head and looked down at Adrian, whose face was wet with tears. Gabriel, that's enough. In one swift motion, Natalie was away from the doorway and between Adrian and Gabriel. She raised her hand to block Gabriel's blow. She could feel her heart racing as she stood up for her boss for the very first time. Gabriel took a deep breath and lowered his hand away from Adrian. He closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. You are here to sit in your room and think about everything you just said. I hope you come to your senses, Adrian. You're tearing this family apart. Gabriel finished scolding and turned back to exit the room, ignoring Adrian as he sniffled quietly. Natalie, meet me in my office, Gabriel instructed as he passed her and began walking down the stairs. Natalie looked down at Adrian. She looked back at Gabriel until he was more than halfway down the stairs. She bent down and quickly wiped his cheeks with her thumbs before running after Gabriel, putting her index finger to her lips as she passed Adrian's bodyguard. The bodyguard nodded at her, knowing she'd only get in more trouble if Gabriel found out what she was showing affection to Adrian. He gave Adrian one last look and closed the door behind both of them, leaving Adrian alone in his room again. Natalie ran after Gabriel and met him in his office as he instructed. There she saw him pour himself a glass, which he sipped from, as he scrolled through the newest designs. Thank you for defending, Adrian. I admit sometimes that boy brings out the worst in me, Gabriel said to her, receiving a nod in response. I apologize if I stepped out of place, sir, Natalie said cautiously, watching his body languish for any more signs of aggression. Don't worry. I was just playing a part. I wasn't actually going to hit him. You stepped in at the right time, Gabriel congratulated her. Sure. Anytime, sir. Natalie nodded. She knew him well enough to know that if she hadn't stepped in, he might have actually hit Adrian. Anything concerning his deceased wife was like rubbing salt in the wound. I'll go and bring your dinner, sir. I'll go and bring your dinner, Mr. Agrest. She bowed her head again before exiting the room.